Hey everybody, welcome back to Franchise Player, and today we're going to be checking out some of my favorite SNK and Neo Geo games on the PS Vita. So I don't know what it is lately, but I've been on a massive arcade game kick, and I was playing a ton of the PSP SNK Arcade Classics game. That's on PS2 and Wii also, I believe, but that has a ton of SNK games, and they're all classics from the 90s, and it really got me back thinking where I was like, you know what, there's some pretty good SNK games on Vita. Let me go back to these. Let me check them out again. And you're about to see, I mean, these games are awesome. It's really cool to have on the go. And, for some folks, kind of felt like having a real portable modern Neo Geo. I have an article that is, a few years old. That looks like a gentleman wrote up about most of these games that I thought was a pretty cool read. So if you're interested in that, check that out down below. And first up, we have quite the heavy hitter here, man, and that is Metal Slug 3. If you have not played a Metal Slug game, I'm sure you've walked by one in an arcade. I'm sure you've at least heard the name Metal Slug, probably at least once in your life, because this series is pretty famous. Metal Slug 3 released in arcades all the way back in March of 2000, so this game is well over 2 decades old and actually didn't make its way on PSN until March of 2015 for the Vita and PS3. Metal Slug 3 is pretty much anything that I would personally want in an arcade game. It has 5 missions. The final mission is pretty long and lengthy. Definitely probably was designed to take your quarters and run, but yeah, 5 missions of fun, and ultimately have held up really well since it's been over 2 decades. You have enemies ranging from zombies, which you can actually turn into a zombie at one point during a playthrough, and there's alien enemies as well. So there's no shortage of cool enemies to kill and take out, and I think the designs of the enemies look pretty cool. I think Metal Slug 3 is about as close as it gets to peak run and gun arcade action. It's everything you'd want, or at least everything I would want personally in a side-scrolling run and gun. You have great enemy design. There's 4 playable characters, so that can keep things a little fresh if you want to do a playthrough with each character. And the never-ending, at least almost seemingly never-ending waves and hordes of enemies just makes it a great game, in something that must have been hella fun in arcades back in the day and is still super fun today. I mean, having this in your pocket is pretty hard to beat in terms of arcade run and gun fun. So yeah, Metal Slug 3 is awesome. If you don't play it on Vita, if you don't play it on a home console, obviously you can emulate this, and it's available on a ton of other systems through collections and whatnot. So yeah, Metal Slug 3, a must-have on Vita in my opinion, especially if you're a fan of run and guns. Next up here, we have another incredible title, and that is King of Fighters 97 Global Match. KOF 97 was released in, 1997. This is the 4th installment in the King of Fighters series, and was back when King of Fighters was still doing pretty much yearly releases like they were Madden. I know it's not realistic and doesn't make a ton of sense, especially nowadays with updates and patches, but it would be pretty cool if there was a fighting game that released yearly. I think it would just build a ton of hype and add a lot more attention to the fighting game space. Now, King of Fighters 97 Global Match on Vita and PS4 came out in 2018. And the global match part that you're hearing in the name obviously was not on the original. Reason why they added that is there was online multiplayer on Vita and PS4. That was a cool touch. Unfortunately, when I went to look online on lobbies, I couldn't find anyone. I refreshed it a couple different times and at different times of the day and still couldn't find anyone. So I think the online is unfortunately dead for this. But the single player modes are still fun. You can do 1v1s, and then you can do the traditional 3v3s where you pick 3 different fighters and you go against 3 other fighters. King of Fighters 97 is a game that really stands out to me in terms of speed. It's a fast fighter, at least for me. I'm not like crazy good at fighters or anything, so it feels really fast paced for me, but really fun. Combos are, I would say, slightly difficult, but then again, I'm not like some fighting game pro by any means, so I'm sure if you're used to the old school controls of fighters, you can pick it up and land combos no problem. The part of KOF 97 that actually sticks out to me most, other than the fun, fast-paced gameplay, would be the graphics. The sprites for the fighters look really good, and I think the stages have really stood the test of time. There's a lot of depth to each stage, Each stage looks pretty unique, and I think the colors are pretty vibrant, and there's a decent amount of things going on in the background of these stages, especially for a game that's this old, coming close to 30 years. But yeah, I highly recommend King of Fighters 97 for Vita. It's a fun fighter to have on the go, especially if you're a big fan of old school 90s fighters. And next up here, we have another beloved SNK title, and that is Samurai Showdown 5 Special. Samurai Showdown 5 was actually the final release for the Neo Geo, and it came out all the way back in July of 2004. It's pretty crazy that, a few years into the PS2 life cycle, the Neo Geo was actually still getting releases. This game was developed in the arcades by Yuki Enterprise and was later ported to PSN by Code Mystics. This was finally ported to PSN back in September of 2017, so it got a release on the Vita, and you could play this on PS4 as well. What was cool about the PSN release is you were finally able to play this online. I tried looking for some games on Vita, refreshed it, multiple times throughout the day, and earlier in the day, later in the day, couldn't find anyone on, so I think the online is unfortunately pretty dead for this. But another cool feature that they added was a gallery filled with tons of art for Samurai Showdown 5. Overall, this was probably my least favorite game on the list here today. And I'm not saying it's a bad game by any means, because it's not. It was just my least favorite due to it being a slower paced fighter. Typically, the fighting games that I like to play are faster paced. Just not really my cup of tea. I know there was a later release on PS4 and Xbox One of a Samurai Showdown game. So if you're playing this and you want to play something a little more modern or new, you have that option. But yeah, overall, wasn't a huge fan of this. And yeah, I don't know. Slower paced fighters aren't really my thing. Next up here, we have one of my favorites, which is Windjammers. Windjammers is a super fun game that was developed and published by Data East and released all the way back in 1994. This port made its way to PSN for the Vita and PS4 in August of 2017, and it included online multiplayer as well. So I think all the folks that were in charge of porting these games did a great job at including online multiplayer for a lot of these older titles, because whether it was newer people looking to play these online with their buddies, or OGs, from back in the arcade days that were looking to kind of relive those memories, maybe with some people that they're no longer living close with, and enjoy the nostalgia of playing these on a modern system. Now, if you've never played Windjammers, in my opinion, you're really missing out. And the best way I could describe it, dude, would be a mix of Pong and air hockey, but on steroids, which already to me, just with that description, I'm like, man, I'm really wanting to hop on this game. But yeah, it's fairly simple when, put like that, Pong and air hockey on steroids. But in my opinion, that's really all you need is a simple recipe for a great arcade game. So Windjammers has a selection of 6 playable characters, and each character is from a different place in the world, and each character also has different strengths, different weaknesses. So some might be faster, some might be stronger, therefore adding some depth to the gameplay. So it might be simple on paper, and ultimately it still is, but the characters having different attributes definitely can help change things up. If you're a stronger, slower character, you're going to be more power focused. And if you're a faster character, speed is definitely going to be something you're going to want to use to your advantage. Offense and defense in Windjammers is really fun, so it's exciting to play on both sides of the ball, so to speak. I think this game is great arcade action. I highly recommend it. I did look online to try to find some matches for online multiplayer, and once again couldn't find anyone to play with, so I think online might be dead, unfortunately, but in my opinion, this is a must-have on Vita. And next up, we have Garou Mark of the Wolves, and this was released back in 1999 in arcades, developed and published by good ol' SNK, and this came to the Dreamcast back in 2001, and I think the Dreamcast is where a lot of folks actually originally played this game. Now, this is a fighter that is definitely much more up my alley. It's faster paced. I love the design and just the speed of the gameplay. It's pretty hard to put down, and I imagine back in the day in the arcades, this was definitely a quarter eater. What was a little different about Mark of the Wolves is it actually had the top system, or the TOP system, and that allowed you before a fight to select a portion of your health bar, and when you reached that portion of your health bar, it would basically give you a power-up where you'd be stronger, and ultimately it made fights a little more interesting, where, hey, if someone got down to that top portion of their health bar, the fight would definitely get a little more intense. This is another game that has an online multiplayer function on PS4 and Vita. I refreshed a couple different times throughout the day and unfortunately had no luck, which this I think would be awesome to play online. So if anybody's down to run any of these games online, drop your PSN below and let's hop on Vita and play some multiplayer, man. I think it'd be really fun to get some people back online on Vita. And last but not least, we have another weapon-based fighter here, and that is The Last Blade 2. The Last Blade 2 was also developed and published by SNK and originally came out in arcades back in 1998. When I originally fired this up, I was like, oh man, this is another weapon-based fighter. Seems kind of similar to Samurai Showdown 5, which I was not a big fan of, but I was pleasantly surprised. This ended up being a really fun game, especially for a weapon-based fighter. The detail of the graphics, I mean, especially the stages and just the lighting effects for a game of this era are pretty hard to beat. Before I started recording this, I had actually fired this up and went to look to see if there was anybody online. And when I did, there was a lobby, went to join it. And then as soon as I went to join, it said it was over or couldn't find the person or whatever. Went to refresh a couple more times, couldn't find anybody else online. So looks like there's at least one other person maybe playing this out there. So yeah, Last Blade 2 definitely has online as well, but yeah, not very active, unfortunately, like the rest of these games. But I highly recommend, if you are going to play it, by putting on some headphones, because the sound design and the sound effects on this game are incredible. I mean, from the background noises on the stages, the sounds from the characters, the clash of the weapons. It sounds great. I mean, I'm not usually a person who's going crazy about audio on games other than soundtracks, but this one is definitely worth playing with some headphones. But yeah, that'll pretty much do it for today's video. Absolutely love playing these SNK games on the Vita. Always cool to discover some new games that you can play on the Vita, even if they're elsewhere. I always think it's cool when there was either a port or some game I didn't know about that was on Vita. It's always fun to revisit the system, even though it didn't get a ton of support in its prime, unfortunately, but still a ton of fun to play. But yeah, these were some fun games. Let me know some SNK games that you really enjoy. Drop them down below. It's a system that I'm really wanting to explore some more. But yeah, as usual, appreciate you for watching, and we'll catch you soon with another video.